It is a Monday morning and I'm having a hard time getting started. Thank you for joining me, Ms Legalista, aka Attorney Shelia, with you in what is going to be a very challenging, troubling video. I have put this off for a really long time. We are going to go over this letter that Ben Crump sent President Biden on behalf of the Robinson family.
Yeah.
I've hesitated to talk about this particular incident that happened. Like most of you, I watched the video and it was awful. It was truly awful. I've held off on talking about this, I think, because as a Black woman, you have other friends and you think that they have your back. To see in this case that not only did they not have her back, but they literally like beat her back, beat her down. Yeah. All right, let me get off of that because that is what is so traumatic about this whole thing. I think that sometimes we can handle things differently if it's some person who's not known to us. But in this instance, these were people who were supposed to be friends. And I should definitely turn off my phone. Let's go ahead and take a look at this letter. Before we get started, the letter comes with some other documents that were attached to it, statements and receipts. I'm going to go through those separately. I really just want to focus on what is written in the letter. I have not had a chance to read this yet. So you literally will be getting my comments and reactions first time around in this case. And for those of you who have been with me for a while, you may notice that I have a new microphone. I had other microphones, I just wasn't using them, but I'm now using this one. As you see at the top of the letter, it's from both of the attorneys working with the family here, Benjamin L. Crump and Sue Robinson. It is sent to the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States, White House, and you know the address. And also the Honorable Antony J. Blinken, Secretary of State, U.S. Department of State. And this was March 13th, 2023. So as you see, this was not that long ago. RE, the death of American citizen Shanquella Robinson in Mexico. Dear President Biden and Secretary Blinken, on behalf of the family of Shanquella Robinson, we write to request immediate diplomatic intervention from the United States government in this transnational criminal case. The case involves the death of Shanquella Robinson, a 25-year-old ambitious, bright entrepreneur and American citizen. Keep in mind, 25 years old, just starting her life. Shanquella traveled to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico on October 28, 2022, and was reported dead in a luxury villa in Cabo on October 29th, 2022. Her 6 travel mates returned to the United States the next day. 3 of the 6 travel mates, Winter Donovan, Khalil Cook, Dejanay Jackson, would transport Shanquella's luggage from Mexico to her mother's home in Charlotte, North Carolina. They would give their condolences and inform Mrs. Robinson that Shanquella passed away from alcohol poisoning. This is the first part where it starts to be troubling because even though this is a statement coming from the attorneys, if you've been following this, if you saw the video, then you know that they left out a whole lot before they said hey, it's alcohol poisoning. On November 16th, 2022, one of the travel mates shared video from a cell phone camera around the campus of Winston-Salem State University, the college that Shanquella Robinson attended. You guys, I was just in Winston-Salem Friday before last. The video shows Shanquella being beaten in the villa while naked by one of the 6 travel mates who was identified by a witness as Dejanay Jackson. An autopsy report prepared on October 30th, 2022 in Mexico by medical examiner Dr. Rene Alberto Galvan Asegura noted that Shanquella's body had a head injury, and all of these documents are included, and concluded that Shanquella's cause of death was a broken neck. After the video of the beating of Shanquella Robinson surfaced online, the Attorney General's office in Baja California Sur initiated a criminal investigation. As a result of the investigation, a warrant was issued for Dejanay Jackson by Mexican law enforcement, one of the 6 travel mates who fled to the United States after Shanquella was pronounced dead. Ms. Jackson was identified as the perpetrator of femicide against Shanquella Robinson, a homicide based on gender. So they're going through the details of this. I know the president has a lot on his plate, but this is one of those things I can imagine that he has already been informed about because it happened in Mexico. Anytime there is something that involves an American citizen being killed in another country, that incident is elevated to a higher level. Usually within the country, you're talking about incidents happening within a state. And so the state attorney general would get involved, or the local prosecutor, depending upon what was involved. But once you involve another country, yes, you're talking about our State Department now being involved to make sure that justice is taking place. And in some instances, whether or not that justice needs to take place here. But we see at this point, they are laying out some of the facts, not all of the facts, but some of the facts around what happened here, really to sort of lay a basis as to why something additional needs to be done. If a United States citizen commits homicide in Mexico and returns back to the United States, as you are aware, they can face criminal charges in the United States under federal law or state law, depending on the circumstances of the crime. Federal charges are brought in cases where the crime involves interstate commerce or federal law enforcement agencies. And this is why I just said it could be federal or state. We know in a transnational case where evidence was possibly transported and persons of interest communicated with each other via cell phone, federal charges could be brought against those responsible for Shanquella's death. So here is where they are making the case that, hey, not just were criminal law violations occurring in Mexico, but we may have some here in the US too. There could be federal charges too. Under federal law, the most likely charge that could be brought against someone primarily responsible would be a violation of 18 USC section 1112, which covers manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter. If the individual's actions meet the requirements of murder under federal law, they could also be charged with a violation of 18 USC section 1111. Federal charges that could be brought against co-conspirators to a homicide include conspiracy to commit murder, aiding and abetting, accessory after the fact, and obstruction of justice. Now let's stop here for just a moment, because recall, we have people who came back, transported property back to the US, made statements to the family about a totally different reason for the cause of death may have been inciting another person during the commission of the crime to do further harm or may not. It depends on what you see in the video and what possible testimony there may be if some of the people who were there open up and share what really happened. When is that going to take place? At what point in time? I can imagine, I'm interrupting myself here, but I can imagine that all of the people who were there probably have spoken to an attorney by now. And that attorney has probably advised them that it's best to wait for them to see what charges may be brought against them before making any statements, saying they're sorry to the family, taking any action, or making any statements that could be used against them should they be charged and then have to go to trial and face these charges. These statements could be brought back up and used against them. Therefore, I can imagine, no, they aren't saying a whole lot. And some of us are probably thinking, if you just stepped up and said, I'm sorry for what happened. And maybe they have. Maybe I haven't seen those videos. I have not seen those videos. You guys can let me know in the comments if you have seen any videos where any of those parties have made any statements, or have you seen their social media? Have they taken it down, or are they just coming back and living out their lives? Let me double check and make sure we've got everything still good here. Okay, next paragraph. As you are also, of course, aware, transnational criminal cases can be complex and challenging to resolve, especially when they involve individuals and entities in different countries. We understand each country has sovereignty over its own citizens and that each country has its own legal systems, which can create issues. We also understand there is a protocol for the resolution of transnational crimes. Despite reaching out to consular authorities, who are tasked with being the family's guide and liaison in cases such as this, we have encountered numerous obstacles in our efforts to receive information for the family on whether those responsible would ever be brought to justice. While on a fact-finding mission on behalf of the family, attorney Shanquella Robinson was advised by a member of the United States Consular Court in Mexico that if the family was seeking information about the case, perhaps the family should reach out to the at-large travel mates. Certainly, this is an unacceptable response to share with an American family in regards to their daughter's murder. I thought I was reading that wrong when I read that. Basically, what I just read was they said, hey, if you have more questions and need more information, why don't you just talk to the people who it appears may have been involved in her killing, in her murder? That's hard to swallow if you are a family member. Years and years ago, when I was much younger, I guess around a teenager or so, I had a family member who was shot and killed in another country. It was my mother's brother. And I remember the phone call when she was at the house and she was on the phone talking to her mother, my grandmother. I'll never forget that. But my mother, my grandmother was older, so my mother had to take the lead on finding out what had happened to her brother, who was fairly young at the time, what had happened to him. And she wound up working with one of our North Carolina senators to keep up to speed with what was going on with the case, making sure that this person was brought to justice. And I remember my mother saying that the only thing my grandmother wanted was justice, that was the way that she put it. So I cannot imagine what this family is going through, feeling like that's what you've been told. That is hard. That is hard. Let me switch back over now from me so we can get back to the letter here. So this is hard. And he says this, certainly this is an unacceptable response. Who says that to someone? That is hard. Given the nature and scope of this case, we believe that diplomatic intervention, yes, it sounds like it, from the US government could help facilitate the necessary cooperation and coordination between the involved parties to ensure that justice is served timely, that the accused are tried under the appropriate legal system, that extradition is possible, and that international cooperation is fostered. Then there's a section here that is underlined. It says the United States can follow the extradition protocol and turn over the individual or individuals responsible for Shanquella's death to Mexican authorities. Alternatively, U.S. federal law enforcement agencies can request concurrent jurisdiction with Mexican law enforcement agencies, which would permit U.S. prosecutors to bring the case in the United States as the involved parties are U.S. citizens. And I have a feeling that the family would, my own take on this, if it were me, that would be my preference, that they be brought to trial here in the US. We have just witnessed what a swift concurrent response from Mexican and US law enforcement agencies looks like in the kidnapping case of a group of US citizens at Matamoros, Mexico. I don't know how to pronounce the next one. Both scenarios we are requesting on behalf of Shanquella Robinson's family require a high level of swift diplomatic intervention. My clients recognize that the U.S. government has many priorities and responsibilities, but believe that intervening in this case would not only serve the interests of justice, but also send a clear message that transnational criminal activities will not be tolerated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Sincerely, Benjamin L. Crump, Esquire, Susan Ann Robinson, Esquire, attorney for Shanquella Robinson family. And then, like I said before, there were a number of enclosures, but I really just wanted to focus on the actual letter in this case, and then maybe talk about some of those enclosures and other attachments, including the autopsy, in a separate video. So you have the family reaching out to the president and the Secretary of State. Concurrent jurisdiction is one of those things that would allow at least the US government to go ahead and proceed with a federal action or federal actions against those that they think were involved, meaning her, quote, travel mates. It appears that one of those has been named. A lot of people have already named her in several videos, Deshaun Jackson. And it hopefully will result in something happening. If you agree with this, if you think that the US government needs to step up its game with this, let me know in the comments. Like I said before, this is really tragic. It's just really tragic to watch friends do this to someone who they say is a friend, is a sister. Hard, hard, hard. Hard for people who aren't even family members to watch this. But I hope that brings you up to speed with what was in the letter, what is being requested by the family. So go ahead and give the video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can stay up to speed as I start to dive a little bit more into this case now that there seems to be some additional movement coming forward. And even more importantly, now that I feel like I can talk a little bit more about it, I needed to step away from it just to sort of process it. Even after I saw the video, it was just a whole lot. It's a whole lot to look at. There are a lot of videos out there now, and they can be a good thing, but they can also be traumatic to the people who are watching them in addition to the family members. So peace and love to everyone. Mwah.